Blood always smells like hot pennies when it cooks on steel. Jace Mercer tasted it in the back of his throat as he dragged himself through the maintenance spine of the battleship, one elbow at a time, while warning sirens screamed above him. The metal under his chest was hot enough to blister. The air was turning white with steam. Somewhere behind him, something the size of a building tore loose with a shriek of tortured alloy. And all across the bridge, the proudest empire in the spiral watched a human mechanic refuse to die. 3 hours earlier, nobody on that ship had even learned his name. Karen transfer ring sat above a dead moon and smelled like coolant, rust, burnt coffee, and desperation. It was the kind of station where empires sent their broken hardware and their embarrassing problems. Freight haulers came in limping. Mercenaries came in bleeding. Nobles came in secret. Nothing noble ever stayed noble for long on Karen. The station sanded all the shine off. That was why Jace liked it. He wasn't much to look at. Mid-30s. Lean in the hard. Ropey way long shifts build a body. Grease under the nails no amount of scrubbing could remove. A left knee that clicked in cold weather. Burned scars up one forearm from a fusion flare accident when he was 19 and stupid enough to think warning labels were optional. He wore a patch station suit and boots held together by sealant and bad language. Useful men rarely looked impressive. He was shoulder deep inside a collapsed coolant regulator when the station loudspeakers barked a priority docking order. The bay around him shuddered. Tools rattled on the tray. Everyone in maintenance Bay 12 stopped what they were doing and looked up through the open latticework of the overhead gantries. Something enormous was sliding past the armored glass. "Sweet mercy," muttered Pell, the loader operator, wiping his hands on his stained vest. "That's a war shrine." It looked like one. The ship was old in the way mountains are old. Vast, scarred. Its hull was a dark matte gray layered with ceremonial gold lines that had long since been scorched black by combat. The prow was carved into the angular face of some long-dead imperial beast. Whole sections had been patched with plates from other vessels. One flank was torn open and crudely sealed. Gun ports the size of houses ran the length of its spine. It didn't look docked. It looked chained. Station personnel began spilling into the catwalks for a better look. Whispering started immediately. Even people who hated the Taurix Empire recognized an Imperial line breaker when they saw one. "The Resolute Vow," said Mara from parts inventory, voice low. "Thought she was lost in the Beliza campaign." "Nah," Pell said. "Not lost. Worse. Survived." That got a few dry laughs. Surviving, Jace had learned, was usually where the trouble started. He dropped back out of the regulator housing, reached for his rag, and turned just as base security entered in a tight wedge formation. Not station security. Imperial retainers. Tall, gold-scale cheek ridges. Polished bone-white armor. Eyes like cut amber. They moved with the stiff control of predators, pretending not to be predators. Behind them came a woman who made the whole bay feel smaller. She was Taurix Highblood. You could tell by the crown ridges sweeping back from her temples, like polished horns, and by the way everyone else unconsciously made room around her. Her uniform coat was dark blue over ceremonial armor, but the coat was scorched at the hem, and one sleeve had been hastily sealed where plasma had cut through it. She stood close to 7 feet tall, carried herself like gravity was a suggestion, and looked at the station crew the way an aristocrat might inspect mold in a pantry. Her gaze passed over loaders, welders, riggers. Then it stopped on Jace. "You," she said. He glanced behind him. "Me. Yes. The human." That narrowed it down. Jace wiped both hands on the rag and stepped away from the workbench. "Depends who's asking." One of the retainers bristled. The woman did not. She only studied him harder. "Commander Seraph Val," she said. "Daughter of House Val. Acting war heir of the 3rd Spear Fleet." Jace gave the name a beat, then shrugged. "Jace Mercer, acting owner of this wrench." A couple of station workers coughed to hide smiles. One of the retainers took a step forward. Seraph lifted a hand. He stopped instantly. "You repaired a Calrex or cutter here last month," she said. "A reactor breach others deemed unsalvageable. Fixed it enough to get paid. You restored a Veyan courier drive from scrap without access to factory schematics." It was mostly guessing. You rebalanced a military docking spindle during decompression while under sedatives. That part was not my best work. Her eyes narrowed, not with anger but curiosity. Why speak as if competence embarrasses you? Because around stations like this, Jace said, tossing the rag aside, if people think you're a miracle worker, they stop paying overtime. A sound came from one of the retainers. A rough nasal click. Snorts. Taurik's laughter, apparently. Sereth did not laugh. My ship requires repair. Then you should have led with money. My ship requires more than repair, she said. It requires resurrection. That changed the room. Jace looked past her again through the bay glass, toward the battered Leviathan moored outside. The resolute vow seemed to hang in vacuum, like a wounded king refusing to kneel. I'm not Imperial, he said. You people don't usually let outsiders breathe on your military hardware. We do not. Then why me? Her jaw tightened. Because every shipwright in my fleet has failed. Every bonded engineer from the core worlds has failed. Every priest of the machine's sanctums has failed. And in 6 days, that ship must cross the shattered reach, carrying the Crown Synod delegation to Draxos Prime. Pell whispered, that route's pirate country. Mara whispered back, pirates don't hit third spear convoys. Traitors do. Jace muttered. Sereth heard him. So did everyone else. A flicker passed behind her eyes. Not surprise. Confirmation. There's sabotage aboard my vessel, she said. The bay went still. If the ship does not make the crossing, Sereth continued, my house falls, the Synod fractures, and 3 border systems declare for rebellion by sunrise. I am not here to negotiate comfort. I am here to solve a problem. Jace folded his arms. And your solution was to shop for mechanics in a junk ring? You misunderstand your position, said one retainer, baring small predator teeth. The commander is offering you honor beyond your species. I didn't ask him, Jace said. The retainer's hand moved toward his sidearm. Seretha's voice cut across the motion like a blade. Enough. Silence. Then she took a thin data slate from inside her coat and tossed it onto Jace's bench. Numbers spilled across the cracked screen. Labor rate, hazard bonuses, salvage rights, emergency discretionary authority. A sum so large Pell physically sat down on the nearest crate. Jace stared. That's an advance, he asked. A quarter. He looked back up slowly. What's the catch? You board immediately. Expected. You remain aboard until the ship is operational or destroyed. Less fun. If you succeed, you will be paid in full and granted free transit anywhere in Val space for life. And if I fail, one of the retainers answered for her, then you will perish with the rest of us. Jace nodded once. At least that part sounds honest. Sereth stepped closer, even exhausted, even battle-worn. She radiated command like heat off a furnace. Can you save my ship, human? There are questions men answer with pride. Questions they answer with fear, and questions that touch that rotten, stubborn place deep in the chest, where bad ideas dress themselves up as duty. Jace looked at the giant broken warship outside the glass, at the lines of ancient armor, at the ugly patchwork repairs, at the star running down the flank like the memory of a blade, a dying machine, held together by rage and habit. He understood those. Maybe, he said. A retainer scoffed. Maybe. Jace pointed toward the window. That thing's old, wounded, and probably full of people who think maintenance is beneath them. So if you want a prayer, talk to your priests. If you want honesty, get out of my way and let me see the corpse. For the first time, Sereth smiled. It wasn't warm. It was the smile of someone too tired to be offended by useful insolence. Prepare to transfer, she said. The shuttle ride overtold Jace everything the payment had not. The crew compartments they passed were too quiet, the kind of quiet people kept when they didn't trust the walls. Bulkheads bore fresh scorch marks. Several internal doors had been welded shut from the outside. 2 corridors still smelled of suppressant foam and burned flesh. Mutiny. Jace asked. Attempted infiltration, said Sereth. By rebels. By cowards. That was not a denial. He followed her into the main engineering vault and nearly stopped walking. The room was cathedral big. Layer upon layer of gantries circled a reactor core, suspended in a magnetic cage, like a captive sun. Prayer banners and old Taurics script hung between coolant trunks. Half the control banks were dark. The other half flickered with fault warnings. Teams of engineers stood in clusters around open housings, too clean to be dockyard grease apes, too polished to be desperate people. When they saw Jace, expressions hardened all around the chamber. "Commander," said the tallest of them, a silver-crested Taurix in formal engineer robes. "What is this?" "This," said Sereth, "is my replacement for every excuse you have given me in the last 40 hours. The engineer's face changed. "A human laborer? Mechanic," Jace said. The Taurix ignored him. "You would bring an unbonded alien scavenger into the heart chamber?" "I would bring a swamp lizard with a hammer if it got my ship moving," Sereth said. "Chief Artifacts Narek, from this moment, Mercer has my full authority." That landed like a grenade. Narek's lip curled. "This is sacrilege." "No," Sereth said quietly. "This is urgency." Jace had stopped listening 3 sentences ago. He was already circling the nearest control stack, eyes moving over stress readings, coolant variants, patch diagnostics, power distribution loss. His face didn't show much when he worked. That was why people who didn't know him often mistook concentration for stupidity. After 60 seconds, he said, "Whoever sealed that manifold used the wrong composite." No one answered. He tapped the panel. "See the bubble pattern under the seam? That's expansion fatigue. Happens when you patch military heat channels with civilian hull resin. Which idiot did this?" An apprentice near the rear stiffened. Narek drew himself up. The emergency field repair was conducted according to sanctified wartime protocol. Jace crouched, dragged a gloved finger along the seam, and held up a curl of half-melted material. "Sanctified my ass. This stuff softens at 1200 Kelvin. Your peak surges hitting 14. That is impossible. Then your sensors are lying. Your charts are lying. Or the ship is haunted," Jace said. "Pick one." A few junior techs exchanged glances. Sereth folded her arms. "Continue." Jace pointed toward the core cage. "That patch fails under combat load. When it goes, this whole lower loop flash boils. Best case, your drives trip and you drift dead. Worst case, the reactor burps hard enough to peel half the stern open." Narek snapped. "We are not under combat load." "Yet," said Jace. He kept walking. The next problem found him before he found it. A faint vibration in the deck. Not engine harmonics. Not reactor churn. Intermittent. Wrong. He stopped, knelt, and pressed 2 fingers to the plating. Thumb. Thumb, thumb. Pause. Thumb. Like a heartbeat skipping. "Open this," he said. A tech blinked. "That panel is sealed." "Not a request." Narek bristled again. "That crawl space houses primary signal relays. It has no bearing on propulsion." Jace looked up at him. "And yet something inside it is tapping your ship like a dying metronome. Open it." Sereth didn't even turn. "Do it." 5 minutes later the panel came off. Inside the conduit sat a fist-sized black capsule buried under bundled relay lines. Smooth surface. No markings. Warm to the touch. Jace leaned back slowly. "There's your sabotage." Everything moved at once. Weapons came up. Engineers scattered. Sereth barked orders. 2 Marines rushed forward. Jace threw a hand out. "Don't touch it." 1 Marine froze inches away. Why? Because if I planted a pulse leech inside a relay crawl space, I'd rig it to read biometric changes. Panic. Motion. Heat spikes. Pull it wrong. It cooks the signal bus. Bricks every control path in the stern. Narek's voice came out thin. "Can you remove it?" Jace exhaled through his nose. "Probably." "Probably," the chief artifact said, scandalized, as if the word itself insulted his ancestors. Jace glanced up. "You want confident lies or useful hands?" Sereth stepped beside him. "What do you need?" He started listing before she finished asking. Non-conductive clamps, thermal blanket, analog cutters. No one breathes near my left shoulder. And somebody get me coffee strong enough to violate treaty law. For the next 4 hours, The resolute Val learned the first rule of human repair work. Silence the people who aren't helping. Jace cut, clamped, listened, waited. Sweat gathered under his collar. Taurek's engineers watched like priests at a public execution. Twice Narek tried to interrupt. Twice Sereth shut him down with a look sharp enough to cut cable. At last Jace eased the capsule free and sealed it inside an armored box. The chamber exhaled. "Is that it?" Sereth asked. Jace shook his head. "No." He stood, stretched the ache out of his lower back, and pointed upward toward the dark web of relay branches vanishing into the hull. "That's one symptom. Sabotage that neat. There'll be more." He was right. There were 6 more devices hidden across the ship. 1 inside a gunnery coolant rack, 2 near life support trunks, 1 behind a shrine panel in the command gallery, 1 embedded in a gravitic stabilizer coupler, and the worst of them buried deep in the ventral drive spine where only maintenance techs or very determined lunatics ever went. By the time they found the last one, Jace had stopped being the human to half the engineering crew. Now he was Mercer. Or, in the case of one blunt junior tech named Taurek, the heat-mad mammal. Jace accepted both. He also learned what nobody had told him on the station. The Crown Senate delegation wasn't just important. Aboard the Resolute Val was Princess Erin Val, Seretha's younger sister and final bloodline claimant recognized by the war houses. If the Senate saw weakness, House Val would fracture. If House Val fractured, the rebel worlds would stop hiding and start burning trade routes openly. If that happened, border systems full of human contract workers, settlers, miners, and families got caught in the middle. So no, this wasn't only about a ship. It never was. He met Aaron by accident. He was emerging from a side ladder shaft, filthy, exhausted, and carrying a half-fried relay brick when a voice behind him said, "You look too small to be causing this much trouble." He turned. The princess couldn't have seen 20 summers, by human measure. Younger than Sereth. Same crown ridges, though finer. Same golden eyes. But where Seretha's gaze felt like a drawn blade, Aaron's felt like light through glass. She wore simple travel armor instead of court finery, and one sleeve was rolled to the elbow where she'd been helping medics carry supplies. "Depends what kind of trouble," Jace said. "The useful kind, I'm told." "Then yes, I'm an expert." Aaron smiled. "My sister says you insult people when you are focused." "I insult people when I'm awake. That must be exhausting. For them, mostly." She laughed at that. Real laughter, not noble politeness. Behind her stood 2 guards, pretending not to listen. Aaron's eyes dropped to the relay brick in his hand. "Will we make Draxos Prime?" Jace considered lying. Then he saw the strain around her mouth. The sleeplessness. The way she asked, not like royalty expecting comfort, but like a young woman trying to measure fear honestly. "If nobody shoots at us," he said, "I'd say maybe." "And if somebody does?" He hefted the fried part. "Then I'm going to have a very long day." Her smile faded only a little. "That is not reassuring." "It's not supposed to be," he said. "It's real." She nodded, as if she valued that more than reassurance. Maybe she did. As he started past her, she said quietly, "My sister does not trust easily. Neither do I. But she placed the heart of our house in your hands." Jace looked back. Aaron continued, "Do not let our enemies be right about humanity." He blinked. "And what do they say about humanity?" Her face went still. "That you survived by crawling into the cracks left by stronger species." Jace snorted. "Funny thing about cracks." "What?" "That's where all the important wiring runs." They departed Karen 13 hours later under full escort. The Resolute Val would not so much leave dock as pry herself free from it. Every deck shuddered as the ancient drives lit. Fault warnings still blinked in stubborn clusters across engineering, but the core held. Power climbed. Weapon spines came online in sequence like old gods opening their eyes. As the warship pushed into black, a cheer rose from parts of the crew that had forgotten how to sound hopeful. Jace didn't cheer. He sat on an overturned crate in auxiliary control, gulping station coffee from a dented metal flask, while his hands shook from fatigue. Targ dropped beside him. "You should sleep. You should grow a second useful hand," Jace muttered. "Taurek, who had 4 arms, glanced at all of them as if considering whether he'd been insulted. That is anatomically offensive. Good. Tarek clicked amusement. The commander was correct. You do insult people to remain conscious. It's a time-saving measure. Their brief peace lasted 11 minutes. Then the proximity alarms began. The bridge of the Resolute Vow was built like a throne room, armored by paranoia. High command dais, tactical pits, shielded view walls stretching 3 decks tall. Sereth stood at the center as the stars ahead of them fractured into red threat markers. Report, she snapped. Multiple contacts emerging from the debris veil. Called tactical. No transponder allegiance. Narek, present only because Sereth still had not thrown him out an airlock, hissed through his teeth. They tracked us. Count, Sereth demanded. 8 no 10 ships. Converted haulers and strike frigates. Pirates. The tactical officer's voice went flat. Not pirates, Commander. Rebel Warcant markings. Of course. They were halfway through the shattered reach, where old battles had filled the dark with drifting metal and sensor noise. Perfect ambush ground. Perfect place to finish what sabotage had started. Sereth's eyes went to Jace. Status. He hated when commanders asked mechanics that during combat, as if a wrench could become a shield by patriotism alone. Core stable for now, he said. Port rail spine still running hot. If you broadside too long, you'll cook the lower feed. Can it fire? Yes. How many volleys? He did the math against instinct and bad wiring. 3 safe. For stupid. 5 memorable. Sereth bared her teeth. On Taurek's faces, it wasn't always a threat. Then let us be memorable. The battle hit like a hammer. Rebel ships came screaming through the debris veil, engines burning dirty and hot. The first missile spread splashed against the Resolute Vow shields and turned half the bridge amber. Return fire from the Imperial gunnery decks split one attacker in 2, but 3 more used the wreckage as cover and dived for the wounded flank. Impact lower starboard. The deck bucked under Jace's boots. Shield bleed into Section 9. Coolant loss in dorsal batteries. Boarding pods detected. That last one snapped every head on the bridge. Sereth's voice became iron. Seal inner compartments. Kill gravitic lifts. Marines to breach sectors. Jace was already moving. Where you going? Barked Narek. Engineering. Jace shot back. Ships don't win fights by yelling at them. 2 decks down, the warship was coming apart by degrees. One corridor had depressurized. Another was filling with smoke. Emergency klaxons pounded through the hull. Jace hit a junction and nearly collided with Erin and her guards escorting medics toward a shelter alcove. What are you doing here? He snapped. Erin pointed to the wounded on the stretchers. What does it look like? A blast rocked the corridor. One medic went down hard. The lights flickered red. Shelter now, Jace said. Erin opened her mouth to argue. A second impact tore the bulkhead at the far end of the passage inward like foil. Boarders came through the smoke. Not Taurek's. Not pirates. Lean gray-armored infantry, with bone masks and shock pikes crackling blue. House Corvin irregulars. Rebel elite. The first guard died before he finished raising his rifle. The second got one shot off, dropping a boarder, then took a pike through the throat. Erin stumbled backward. The medics screamed. The rebels charged. Jace had no rifle. He had a relay case, a tool belt, a half-empty flask, and a maintenance cutter rated for old bolts. So he did what mechanics do when the machine explodes in their face. He hit the nearest problem as hard as possible. The relay case smashed into the lead attacker's helmet with a wet crack. Jace ripped the cutter free and drove the white-hot blade into the gap under another rebel's arm. Burning composite filled the air. Someone shouted. Someone fell. A shock pike clipped Jace's shoulder and blasted his whole left arm numb. Move, he roared at the medics. Erin didn't freeze. Credit where it was due. She grabbed one end of a stretcher and dragged with the surviving medic toward the alcove. A rebel lunged for her. Jace caught him at the knee with a boot. Felt something pop. Then took the butt of a rifle across the temple hard enough to turn the corridor sideways. He went down, rolled, came up on one hand. Blood ran into his eye. A shadow rose over him. The rebel lifted the pike for the finishing thrust. Aaron fired first. The princess held the dead guard's sidearm in both hands. The plasma bolt took the attacker in the neck. He dropped like his strings were cut. For half a second the corridor held still. Then station-born instinct took over. "Run!" Jace yelled. They ran. He slammed the shelter hatch behind them and dropped the manual lock. Bodies hit the other side instantly. The metal rang. Once. Twice. Again. Inside the cramped chamber, wounded crew cried out in the red dark. Aaron was breathing hard, eyes huge but steady. Jace pressed his back to the hatch, listening. Another hit. Another. Then distant rifle fire. Screams. Silence. The hatch stopped shaking. Aaron stared at the pistol in her hand as if it belonged to someone else. "I killed him." "Yeah," Jace said, breathing hard. "Try not to romanticize it." Her gaze jerked to him, shocked. Then, absurdly, she laughed once. A brittle sound. Half disbelief, half survival. "You are bleeding badly." He touched his forehead and looked at the blood on his fingers. "Looks dramatic. Means I'm probably alive." A child's voice from the back of the shelter whispered, "Are we going to die?" Everyone in the compartment went quiet. Jace looked toward the voice. A crew apprentice, maybe 14 by human measure, clutching his burned hand to his chest. You could lie then. People do. Because lies sound merciful in the dark. But mercy that breaks on first contact isn't mercy. Jace crouched despite the pain in his knee. "Not today." The boy swallowed. "How do you know?" Jace reached up and banged his knuckles once against the hatch. Because whoever built that door expected worse than them. The kid actually nodded. Needed something to hold. Took it. Aaron looked at Jace differently after that. Not as an outsider. Not as hired help. As ballast. He left them there with 2 surviving medics and forced himself back into the corridor. He wanted to stay. Wanted 5 minutes to sit down and remember how breathing worked. Instead, he limped toward engineering while the ship shook around him. By the time he arrived, the heart chamber was chaos. Sparks rained from an open relay tower. One coolant loop had ruptured, and Narek was screaming orders nobody could follow because 3 different systems were dying at once. Tarek was pinned under a collapsed maintenance ladder. Jace vaulted a cable trunk, dropped beside him, and heaved. Pain lit his shoulder like fire. The ladder shifted enough for Tarek to slide free. "You came back," the junior tech said, stunned. Couldn't think of a worse idea fast enough. Tarek clicked weak laughter, then pointed at the core readout. Jace's stomach sank. The sabotage they had not found wasn't another device. It was logic corruption. Somebody had planted a dead man routine deep in the ancient thermal control net, under full combat draw. It was slowly feeding false temperature stability to the core regulators while the actual heat load climbed past redline. "How long?" Jace demanded. Narek turned, face pale under silver scales. 9 minutes before containment drift. "Inhuman. In everyone." Jace swore. "Can you stop it?" Saratha's voice sounded over the chamber speakers from the bridge. Narek looked at Jace. The whole room did. He scanned the schematic once. Twice. The answer was ugly enough that his brain rejected it on principle. Then accepted it because the ship did not care what was fair. "Not from here," he said. "Explain," Sarath ordered. "The thermal control nets ghosted false values from a manual balancing hub in the drive spine. Old design, pre-modern redundancy. Somebody knew your ship and hid the trigger where no sane person would crawl during combat." "How far?" "400 meters through maintenance conduits," Jace said. "Most of it wrapped around engine bleed lines." Narek stared. "At current output, those conduits will exceed survivable heat." Jace looked at him. "For you, maybe." The Talric's chief stiffened. "Our species does not perspire." "Yeah," Jace said. "I noticed. Bad time to evolve pretty." Tark made a choking sound that might have been horror or laughter. Saratha's voice came hard and clear over the chamber. "Mercer, if you go, can you save the ship?" Jace looked at the access shaft, at the temperature readouts, at his own trembling hands. This is the part people misunderstand about courage. Most of the time, it doesn't feel noble. It feels annoying. It feels like being very tired and very angry that the universe has once again placed a solution somewhere stupid. If I reach the hub, he said, I can hard reset the balance and trick the core into dumping load across the dead fins. Might buy us enough stability for one last firing sequence. And if you fail, he wiped blood from his eyebrow with the back of his wrist. Then you'll have a front row seat to thermodynamics. Sereth didn't hesitate. Do it. Narek grabbed Jace's arm before he could move. You will die. Jace looked down at the hand on his sleeve, then up at the chief artifacts. Maybe, he said, but you people keep talking like that's the worst outcome. He pulled free. The maintenance spine was a metal intestine wrapped around the ship's deepest machinery. Narrow, dark, loud. The deck plating under Jace's palms was already painfully hot. Steam hissed from ruptured microlines overhead. Emergency strobes turned the whole conduit into a pulsing red throat. He crawled. At first it was only heat. Then the ship rolled under incoming fire and flung him sideways into a rib of bare alloy. He bit down on a shout, kept moving. Mercer! Saratha's voice crackled in his earpiece. Status. Still ugly. Enemy frigates are closing. Tell them to wait. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, you are insufferable. Alive, though. Debatable. He almost smiled. Another 50 meters. Another 100. Sweat poured down his back, soaked his shirt, ran into his eyes. The Taurics thought humans smelled strange when working hard. They called it wet blood vapor, like it was some primitive flaw. Right then it was keeping him alive. Evaporation, cooling, biology, old mammal magic. His glove touched a support rung, and skin sizzled through the material. Damn it. He switched grips, kept going. You ever notice how pain changes shape when it goes on long enough? At first it's sharp, then bright, then it settles into the bones and becomes geography. Something you navigate by. Left turn at the burning shoulder. Straight ahead past the screaming knee. Watch your head at the throbbing temple. He crawled through all of it. At 200 meters, he found the first obstruction. A section of conduit had collapsed where a boarding charge had rippled the hull. Twisted pipe. Sparking cable. A gap barely wide enough to squeeze through if you enjoyed stupid odds. Mercer. Sereth again. This time tighter. We have lost shield coverage on the ventral quarter. I'm busy. Can you accelerate? No. A beat. Then quietly. Understood. That did more for him than any speech would have. He shoved the pipe once. Twice. It didn't move. So he cut his pack loose, shoved it through first, flattened himself sideways, and forced his body into the gap. Metal ripped his sleeve. Something tore open the skin along his ribs. For a second he was stuck, chest compressed, heat pressing from all sides. Claustrophobia is just your body remembering it was once prey. Jace closed his eyes, breathed once through his nose. Then he exhaled hard, went boneless, and wriggled through like a man escaping his own coffin. On the other side he lay still for 3 seconds, forehead against hot steel, lungs pumping. Then he laughed once. Hoarse. Not dead, he muttered. Repeat. Sereth said, talking to myself. That is not reassuring. Join the club. At 300 meters the air changed. Sharper, more metallic, hotter. The balancing hub was close. So were the enemy boarders. He heard them before he saw them. Boots clanging in a parallel service branch. Voices in the harsh clipped dialect of House Corvin. They were sweeping toward engineering, likely hunting the control nexus or any survivors hiding in machine spaces. Jace killed his lamp and flattened against the conduit wall. 3 shapes passed the junction below his branch. One paused. The masked rebel tilted his head, listening. Jace's heart hammered. Sweat slid down his neck. One drop fell from his jaw to the deck with a tiny tick. The rebel looked up. Jace moved first. He dropped from the branch onto the attacker's shoulders like a sack of hateful tools. The impact drove them both down. He rammed a screwdriver into the seam under the mask. Once. Twice. Hard. Too hard to think. The second rebel swung a rifle. Jace rolled behind piping, and the shot blew a chunk out of the conduit wall. Steam exploded across the passage. The third came charging through the white cloud. Bad decision. Jace grabbed a loose inspection wrench and hurled it into the ruptured valve wheel overhead. Superheated vapor blasted sideways with a shriek, hitting the two rebels full in the chest. They screamed and staggered blind. Jace took one rifle, slammed the stock into a helmet, then fired point-blank into the last boarder as the man clawed at his cooked mask. Silence dropped fast. Jace stood there panting, the stolen rifle hanging in his numb hands. Mercer, Seraph, we heard discharge. Ran into traffic. Report. Route's clear now. He left the rifle, too bulky, took a sidearm, 2 extra cells, and kept moving. The balancing hub crouched at the end of the maintenance spine, like an altar built by paranoid engineers. Manual wheels, analog gauges, mechanical cutoff solder. Then half the Empire. Somebody had torn the access plate open and wired a black logic thorn straight into the thermal governor assembly. Jay stared at it. That dirty son of a... He was out of time. Core temperature alarms began rising faster. Somewhere far behind him, the ship groaned from stem to stern as the enemy hammered the shields. Mercer, Seraph said, and for the first time there was strain in her voice. She could not hide. We have one hostile cruiser aligning for a kill shot on the delegation decks. Jace dropped to his knees at the hub. Then I guess you'd better kill them first. Can you give me guns? He traced the wiring, found the governor branch, found the override teeth, found the piece that would save the ship if he broke it exactly right, and doom it instantly if he was wrong. His burnt fingers shook. Jace, that voice wasn't Seraph. Aaron, how she got on the line. He did not know. We are hearing the crew pray, she said softly through static. I thought you should know. He barked a laugh. Tell them to pray for someone with smaller hands. Is it truly that bad? Yes. A pause. Then I will be honest as you were honest with me. He closed one eye against sweat, listening. I am afraid, she said. The truth of it landed harder than any noble speech. Jay swallowed once. Yeah, but my sister is still fighting. Aaron continued. My people are still fighting. The medics are still carrying wounded through smoke. A child in the shelter just asked if the human mechanic was larger than the War Marines because he thought nobody so small should sound that angry. Despite everything, Jace laughed. Aaron went on. Do not fail, Mercer. I have no wish to tell that child he placed his faith in the wrong species. The line clicked dead. Jace looked at the wiring one last time. Then he understood the shape of the sabotage. Not just hidden, layered. The traitor hadn't tried to make the ship explode immediately. Too obvious. Too easy to trace. He'd built a failure that would wait until combat stress, feed false comm into every automated response, and force any repair attempt into manual override under lethal heat. Only someone willing to crawl into hell by hand could stop it. Only someone everybody else would dismiss as expendable would ever get there in time. Cute, Jace muttered. Then he tore the logic thorn out with both hands. The hub screamed to life. Red gauges slammed into black zones. Steam burst from relief valves. Warning horns changed pitch. He drove one cutoff wheel open, jammed a breaker closed with the handle of his wrench, and used a sidearm cell as a makeshift conductive bridge where the governor teeth had fused. The metal flashed white. Pain went up both arms like liquid fire. He did not let go. Now he shouted into comms. Cores dumping false stability. You have 40 seconds of real balance. Fire everything. On the bridge, Seraph needed no second order. The Resolute vowed turn. Not gracefully, not safely. Like an old wounded predator deciding the next bite would be its last either way. All primary rail batteries fired in a single rolling chain. The first slug punched through a rebel frigate and kept going. The second ripped the engine block out of another. The third and fourth converged on the incoming cruiser, just as it aligned for the delegation decks. The massive ship tried to yaw away. Too late. The impacts folded it. Across tactical displays, enemy formation cohesion vanished, but the balance dump cut both ways. The ship's dead fins began venting heat through every emergency path available, including the maintenance spine. Jace smelled the insulation burning before he heard it. Then the conduit behind him became a furnace. Mercer, Seraph shouted. Report. He tried to answer, coughed instead. The return route was gone. Flame and white steam swallowed the tunnel mouth. There was one other exit. Up. He slammed an emergency ladder release, kicked the hatch above him open, and dragged himself into a vertical service shaft as fire rolled below. Halfway up, his left hand failed. Numb. Burned too far. He slipped, hit the ladder hard, caught himself one rung lower by sheer panic. You don't quit in the dark. Not when the machine's still making noises. He climbed. At the top hatch, someone was already there. Tarek and two Marines ripped it open from above and hauled him out by his harness as the shaft belched heat like a dragon's throat. The deck under him felt blessedly cold. It wasn't. His nerves were simply losing the argument. Tarek's four hands fluttered uselessly over him. You smell terrible. Means it worked. A Marine looked at the readouts, then back at Jace with open disbelief. The core is stabilizing. Jace rolled onto his back, staring up at the ceiling. Told you. Mostly haunted. Should have died and did not. Saw a war heir unbroken. Saw a princess alive. Saw damage. Smoke. Survival. Sometimes that is better propaganda than perfection. Jace had expected to be paid, patched, and politely forgotten. Instead, he was dragged into the Synod Hall in a borrowed formal coat that fit badly across the shoulders and made him look, in his own words, like a mechanic attending his own trial. The chamber was full of nobles with jeweled ridges, military delegates, core world merchants, and enough ceremonial steel to build a small moon. Human contract representatives stood clustered near the rear, clearly expecting to be ignored. Then Seraph did something absolutely unhinged. She called Jace to the center dais. Murmurs rolled through the hall immediately. A few open sneers, too. One elder lord leaned toward another and said, quite audibly, "A labor animal at the oath platform?" Jace heard it. So did Seraph. The war heir didn't even look at the elder when she answered. "Yes," she said, "a labor animal. The kind that kept my ship alive, while titled men hid behind protocol." The hall went dead silent. Seraph turned to the Synod. House Val arrives with proof of conspiracy, proof of rebel coordination, and proof that our enemies built their knife on the assumption that humans are soft-bodied tools who break quietly. She placed an armored hand on Jace's shoulder. They were mistaken. Jace hated being stared at by hundreds of nobles, hated the coat, hated the polished floor, hated that his bandaged hands itched under the wraps. But when he glanced toward the rear and saw the human delegates standing straighter than before, some with expressions he could only call stunned pride, he stopped hating it quite so much. Aaron stepped forward next. "The border worlds bleed first when the core grows arrogant," she said. "This human did not save only our house. He saved every treaty line, still holding fire back from our frontier. If any voice here wishes to call his kind parasites again, let that voice first explain why parasites were the only ones willing to crawl into our burning heart." No one answered, because sometimes the truth enters a room and strips the furniture bare. The conspirators were dragged into daylight within 2 days. House Corvin's network cracked under evidence, salvaged from the sabotage routines and Rebelcom's cores. Arrests spread. Fleets realigned. Small wars were postponed by larger fear. The Human Trade League suddenly found their contracts reviewed with a great deal more respect. As for Jace, the Empire tried to offer him medals. He asked for parts access. They offered him an estate. He asked for docking rights and a machine shop. They offered him an honorary command. He said, "Absolutely not. I don't even like managing lunch breaks." In the end, he accepted 3 things. His pay, a lifetime repair charter recognized in Val space, and stewardship over the Resolute Val's restoration, on the grounds that nobody else aboard was now foolish enough to tell him no. That last part, secretly, pleased him the most. Weeks later, long after the Senate storm had settled into fresh power maps and whispered fear, Jay stood alone on the forward maintenance deck, watching dock crews swarm over the old warship scars. New armor plates were being fitted, burnt cabling replaced, gun housings aligned. The giant vessel still looked ugly, but now it looked ugly on purpose. Bootsteps sounded behind him. Seraph stopped at the rail. "You are supposed to be resting." "I am resting." You are holding a plasma torch. It's relaxing. She watched the dock cruise in silence for a moment. Aaron tells me the Shelter Child has begun building toy ships and insists all of them require a human engineer figurine. Jace groaned. That's how legends start. Next thing you know, they'll give me heroic cheekbones. You do not possess heroic cheekbones. Thank God. Saratha's mouth shifted. Barely. Almost a smile. Then she said, more quietly, when I first came to Karen, I expected to purchase labor. Nothing more. My tutors taught me humanity survives by attaching itself to stronger structures, by benefiting from the order others build. Jace set the torch down. And now, she looked out at the ship he had saved. Now I think your species does something far more dangerous, she said. You enter broken systems everyone else has given up on. Then you refuse to leave until they work. Jace considered that. Yeah, sounds about right. Why? He laughed once under his breath. Because somebody has to. Because machines don't care about pride. Because if a thing can still run, letting it die feels wrong. Take your pick. Sareth nodded slowly, as if storing every word. At last she asked, and if the galaxy breaks harder than a single ship? Jace picked the torch back up and thumbed the ignition. Blue-white flame leapt to life. Then, he said, you'd better find more humans. She stood there a long moment. Then, in the formal cadence of her people, she gave him a warrior's bow. Not shallow, not symbolic, real. When she left, Jace went back to work under the belly of the warship with sparks raining around him like captured stars. That was the secret, in the end. Not that humans were strongest. Not that they were fastest. Not that they were chosen by fate, or favored by destiny, or born with some impossible gift the galaxy could never match. The secret was smaller, meaner, more stubborn. Humans were the species that kept going after dignity had burned away, after comfort was gone, after cleaner hands and better bloodlines and stronger bones had stepped back from the heat and declared the problem impossible. We were the ones who crawled into the cracks, into the vents, into the fire, and once we got our hands on a failing heart of a thing, we refused to let go. That was what the Empire learned aboard a dying warship. Not that humanity was beautiful, not that humanity was noble, that humanity was useful in the hour when usefulness mattered more than pride, and in a galaxy built by proud fools. That made us terrifying. If you loved this gritty HFY tale of blue-collar human resilience, stubbornness, and one mechanic dragging an empire back from the edge, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more long-form sci-fi stories. Ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and share this with your fellow HFY fans. Then drop a comment below. If you were on that burning ship, would you have trusted the polished nobles or the grease-covered human with the wrench? Stay safe out there in the galaxy, and I'll see you in the stars.